Good evening. I am Prasanna. I'm the technical lead for mobile apps at realestate.com.au. This is better? Close. I would like to start today with a couple of scenarios that happens in an organization like realestate.com.au and perhaps others. Every so often, the mobile teams get an invite to a calendar invite to a product release, a product launch celebration kind of thing from another part of the business. People sitting in another area of the business, this happens quite often because there's a lot of experimentation going on. There's a lot of areas in the business. It's a large enough business. When something like this happens, and there is a specific. In this specific one was about a couple of years ago. This is a product called property value, and you go in. It usually happens is that there's a lot of snacks and cake. There is usually talks. There's people talk about how they made this happen. What does the team look like, and everything. And there's usually a panel, and then at the end there's usually a Q&A. In the Q&A. Again, generally, there's a question about, hey, but what about mobile? Still. Not from me, not always. But there is this question, and the answer usually is, of course, we thought about mobile. Of course, we are mobile first, and there is a beautiful mobile experience from the scratch on mobile web. This goes live a few months goes by, and if the product is successful, if it is a successful product, and this one was, this property update, property value was a product where you could put in your address and it will give you the estimated price for this property, which is great, and it will also give you a transaction history, rental history for that property, as well as other properties in that street. It's a really useful feature. It is a web view as well. It's not, the experience itself is not that great. So few months goes by, and if it is a successful product, they will come to the mobile teams and go, hey, we would love to add this feature into the mobile apps. Of course, we don't want to redo the whole thing again. That will be a waste. Are you able to just put in a button at the bottom, sometimes literally a button at the bottom, and when you tap on that, you can see the web view. That happens all the time. And a couple of years ago, we started thinking about why does this happen again and again? Why does this keep happening? Obviously, these are really smart people working in really smart teams, working with good intentions. They want to get the best experience for their teams. And obviously, the problem is that capabilities drive requirements, and which means that when you put a team of backend engineers and web engineers, they come up with requirements that are suitable for those systems. It would be great to get a couple of mobile engineers in all these teams that have these capabilities, and they'll automatically start making requirements that are for apps as well. That brings us to scenario 2. That's also all the other areas where there are web views in the app. There is this one team in the organization where they've been putting in web views for a little bit of time. They've been doing this way. And they find that that's good. It reaches a lot of people, this way of delivering features. It reaches a lot of people, but then product conversion at some point tapers off. It's not great. To solve that problem, they thought that we can either wait for the mobile teams. There's this one mobile team or two mobile teams in an organization to add it to their backlog and wait, or they can hire some mobile developers and start doing this. That's great. And they started trying this. They asked about this. They come to us, they show us this feature and go, this is what we would like to do. What do you think? And they go, that sounds great. Go ahead, do it. They want to put something in the apps. They come back to us in a month or so and go, this is really hard. There is a lot to understand here. This is a small team that we're putting together. It is really, really hard to put something inside the apps that is, it is hard to understand iOS and Android. They are completely two different architectures. And this needs to be easier than it is so that they can do this often. This does not scale. This is the problem that at RAA we started looking at over a couple of years ago. And we've been looking at what needs to change so that we can be a mobile-centric organization, which means that any area of the business can have mobile capability and can start contributing. There are organizational process changes that obviously are needed. Communication changes, there's a lot of changes needed there. There's also a architectural change that is needed because you want to be able to contribute content without having to know the world about your architecture, about the core part of the apps. And that's the premise of my talk, scaling mobile with architecture. Top level goals for this architecture that we thought about were support all teams in contributing to key areas of the apps. It's fine if at the start the other areas of the business are not able to contribute to all areas of the apps. If they are able to contribute to in a couple of strategic areas, like for us, search results screen, that is a really important one. If they're able to contribute and that is a good starting point, that is great. Teams should be able to focus on their own content without having to worry about the infrastructure, how to put it in and how do you get the results and all the things that come along with it. And we want a similar way of contributing across iOS and Android because many of the engineers now in our teams are across iOS and Android. They are mobile developers, which means that they are either iOS primary or Android primary. So if an engineer goes in and they are able to make this change, make this content available in one of their primary areas, if this is an Android developer, and they're able to contribute content, and if they go to iOS, and if the models and the architecture is very similar, it makes it really easy for them. With that in mind, I would like to talk about some of the, we've been working on this for about 8 months now, and the first release of this went out a couple of months ago in a smaller area of the app, and next month we'll be releasing this in search results screen. I would like to talk about some of the aspects of the architecture here. At the top level, the core to the architecture core to this architecture is ability for other areas of the organization to be able to register to provide content to certain areas. So we started with search results. There's the app, and we started with the search results as a module, and you can provide all these and more different types of content to the apps, to the search results. There's more here, and this is just the sum of them. When a team wants to contribute, we want to make that into its own silo. They don't have to understand. They don't have to go into the main app to start making this content available. So they'll be working inside their modules. These are all CocoaPods. This LOB1 is one CocoaPod. Line of Business 2 is another CocoaPod, and they are able to make these things available. And in the search results, there is a registry into which all these other modules register to say, hey, I can provide you content, and these are the types of contents that I can give you. Modules declare interested types. These are the I can go ahead.
Struggling to understand what you're saying. So could you clarify, for example, when you say a team, are these multidisciplinary teams that want to provide content? What do you mean by content? What does that mean?
For example, in search results screen, if a team that is working on a feature like property value, say, and they want to put a call to action, and when you tap on that, you want to be able to. Product teams which has developers, product designers, everybody, in any decent sized organization. Modules declare their interested types. So for example, a residential module declares that it is interested in a listing, it's a property, and another product called legions, let's say. And another module might say, I'm interested in a couple of types of ads, that kind of things. Using that mechanism, the search results then, search results view control then registers those types, those kinds of cells with the collection view. So as soon as it gets that it is a listing and a legion, it then registers with the collection view. Let's talk about next what the data looks like. We have a mobile companion API, which is it gives us the experience API. the mobile companion API collates all the information from all the other sources and gives it to the mobile apps exactly as the mobile apps need it. So if you're looking at the mobile companion API and if it gives you a listing, that's an object, and because it has already registered the cells, as soon as the listing object comes in, and it can immediately go, what is the cell that is available for this model using this reuse identifier. Like the model has the reuse identifier, and it immediately asks you what is the cell, and the collection view gives you the cell because it is happening in two different stages. As soon as you have the cell, then you can give it the listing object, the listing model, and you're able to create the complete view, and you're able to display that. The companion API returns view models and not models, which means that to display a property, it is only giving you things that are needed to display that, not the whole listing object, and there is no conversion happening there, which means that all the model to view model transformations that were happening in both iOS and Android, all the testing now just moves to the companion API, and any of the transformations that needs to happen, any changes in transformation that can happen without having to do an app update. Another interesting thing here is we are using protocol buffers for the transportation mechanism instead of JSON. We started looking at protocol buffers as a way to make things fast. It is a really, it is about 1/4 of the size of a JSON payload at a considerable size. But the important distinction and the important way, big advantage of this we've seen so far is that the same model is being used across the companion API, the backend, the iOS and the Android apps. That is a great thing because you don't talk about contract as soon as that happens. What you're talking about is how do you model this domain. That is a really important distinction. And size is a good bonus as well. Once we have this where the companion API is giving you the view objects, view models, and you're able to get that, and it is being dispersed to any of the registered contents. We next start thinking about, okay, that's great, but all of these teams are starting to put together, all of these teams are starting to create very similar views. For example, this is a property, and there is another kind of property or another team that owns the developer listings, the developer projects. And they both have many of the same ideas here. At the top is a it's an agent profile, carousel, and then these little things, the green and the things of the tags and the info panel. There's a little agent image. All of those things are across multiple different modules. We don't want these teams to be creating them again and again. The part of making it easy for them to develop apps is to make it available easily for them. So as soon as we see that a team, more than one team wants a UI element, we make it available in a thing called common UI so that they can just take it and give it the model and it'll appear. The good thing about this is that in one of those UI elements, if for some reason the backend is giving you a malformed information, it's a protocol buffer, one of the things is not available, that UI part just collapses. In that property, if you're able to see that there is a carousel is missing for some reason, it just collapses, and you still see a listing, but without the carousel. So what is in the common UI? All of those, the top agent branding image. There is the carousel, the tags, the whole of info panel. All these bits, bobs, and cards. That is the feature strip. That whole thing and the save star. All of these things are available. We are very careful to make sure that is not very bloated. Only when if a couple of elements inside your module needs a thing, you don't put it into common UI. Only when you traverse across multiple modules, then you put it into the common UI. This is dynamic content is not something that is core to the goal of the architecture, but this is something that we push our boundaries a little bit to see where we can get. But this is one of my favorite things in the architecture. So each of those elements here, like I talked about, this is on the left hand side is the template. you have a template and the branding strip, carousel, it has the info panel and an avatar there. Those are the main components. Each of those components have multiple different sizes based on how expensive that ad is. When you get that, what ends up happening is when you, for each of those things can be in 3 different layouts. So say the branding strip can be in small, medium, large. The carousel can be in small, medium, large. Info panel can be in 2 different sizes. So that means that you're having to put together like 3 multiplied by 3 multiplied by, it's about 52 different cells you're having to put together. Obviously, we would like to avoid that. What we've done is pull up that template, and then when the companion API gives us the results, what it does is it puts together a little reuse identifier for that combination of the layouts and each of these objects. So as soon as that comes in, the collection view creates a set of those reuse identifiers and registers those reuse identifiers. And so in the next version of the app, where for some reason we we create a combination that is not available today, there is no app update needed, and the collection view just creates it on the fly. Backwards compatibility. When we are submitting apps like this and many of the data comes from the backend, there is always the risk of we need to consider backwards compatibility. That Protobufs helps a little bit there. What happens is if you release an app today and in the next version of the app you add a new kind of a list, new kind of item in the list, that comes up in the old versions of the app as unknown. And as soon as it is an enum and it just comes up as an unknown and you just drop that. That's pretty good. Another kind of backwards compatibility where we need is what I talked about just before. In the layout, the carousel, you have three kinds of layouts, small, medium, and large. And if at some point in the future we want an XL layout, what happens to the older versions of the app? We obviously do not want to carry over all those extra logic to add it to only the new versions of the app, and you don't want to also, for an XL, you don't want to fall back to a small, because that will be bad for people who paid for those ads. The way that works is we've been able. It works like the font family in CSS. So it is like each of the elements is the layout is a list of layouts. So it is at the moment it simply says an array of large layout. If you add an XL layout in the future, and as soon as you need backward compatibility, you add XL and the L, which means that there's a concept of first available layout. The view there displays the first available, first known layout it knows about, and then it displays that. We've talked about search results, and about a couple of months ago, we started thinking about like, well, what does this look like in other screens, other areas of the apps? What can we do? Do we want to put together like infrastructure similar to this? Well, we thought that many of the screens in our apps are large scrolling list of items. So what we looked at was we are able to just remove the search results and move it extract the list part into a universal list, so that the search results and the collections and let's say inbox, all those areas can now use the same infrastructure, which means that other areas of the businesses, like if you create a completely new instance of this universal list, which composes, its search results is composing a universal list, but if let's say inbox screen also wants to compose a universal list, it is able to register a completely different set of modules and a completely different set of content, and it behaves like a completely different UI component. With this, we are, like I said before, we are going out live with this at the end of this month, and we've been working with a couple of partners inside, teams inside the business to get feedback and working with them. Next, we'll be opening up into to everybody. That's all I have. Thank you. Questions from them?
This is not really related to your talk, but it's related to something you said. You're using protobus for your payload. Are you using gRPCs for your servers, or are you using something else to transfer the protobus?
No, we're using protobus across HTTP. Yeah.
Hey,
They're just RESTful APIs, sorry.
good talk. Got a couple of questions. First one is, this actually sounds like a really good approach to reusable, extensible UI.
Thank you.
Are you thinking about doing some blog posts or maybe an open source project that demonstrates it down the track?
Yeah, so at the moment, we're in the delivery pressure of delivering this thing in about 15 days. This is the first part of it. We would like to, yes.
Cool. Second question is, you said one of the goals was to get more parts of business involved, more teams contributing. Why did you choose this particular approach over something like React Native, given that REA has a lot of JavaScript devs?
The whole point we were trying to get to was to make it a better app. Look, well, we have a lot of mobile engineers who do a good job. We think to put content into mobile is not to just come in with whatever you know. Learn mobile to do a good mobile app. That's simply. And we haven't proven out that React Native is faster in any way, or it translates over in any way. So.
Prasanna, can you tell me a bit more about the overlap between the people that write the companion API and the people that work on the mobile app? Is there a shared understanding of the two?
I've missed saying that the companion API is owned by our team. It is our team. And that doesn't mean everybody in my team know very well about backend engineering. We have a couple of really good engineers, and we work with them. I would like to get to a point where all our mobile engineers are very good at, or at least pretty good at backend engineering. Because we are talking about the same models, that brings us a ubiquitous language. So we are talking about the exact same thing from design to code. Branding strip. As soon as you say a branding strip, everybody knows from product to design to the backend engineers to the mobile engineers. So that really helps. And the modeling is done the same way. So there's that's how we're working together with the backend engineers.
Can you share what the platform is?
Oh, sure. It's Java 8, the backend.
Thanks.
I have so many questions. But I can probably only think with you.
Save the ones for the top.
Yeah. So can you talk about how you facilitated that communication between everyone? So from the designers through to I have some inside knowledge on this, but I want to maybe explain some of it so the rest of the people get. And the other thing I'm interested in is, have you done any thinking at all about extending this model beyond just content providers? So, one of the classic things you can do on is styling a favorite property.
The last bit, can you please say that again?
So you can favorite property, right? So you can perform actions on pieces of content. You can also obviously dig into those content, right? So you tap on a property and it takes you somewhere else within the app. So I'm just wondering if you've done any preparatory thinking about how to enable teams to build sort of deeper virtual experiences, like I tap on this property and it takes me some place, and it's not just a web view.
Yeah, I'll answer the first one. How do you enable the communication between the designers and product and the engineers? We started with the concept of native design system, where everybody's doing a design system. as soon as you identify that there is a view that needs to go, there is an object that needs to go into the apps, we add it to the native design system. It's a website where you can see that. You click on it and see it, and at various layouts you can see the sizes at different operating systems. So it is very clear for everyone to see. Unlike in React projects, there's no JavaScript code you can copy and paste, but it is there for you to look at immediately, and it is a challenge for you to keep it updated as of now. What is in the common UI is really important for us to keep it updated in the NDS. That's how we are handling that. Second part, other areas, for example, this starring. Because they are in modules, these are challenges we had to go through before we could release it. Obviously, I only talked about certain aspects of it. So the saved nature of a property stays in a completely different data source. That doesn't come from the search results. That is being overimposed from a different data source, which comes from another backend. And you store it locally. Because that is personal data for this user, you do not have to wait until the search results is there to get that data. So as soon as you launch the app, you kind of do a sync mechanism and you get those results, what properties are saved. And then when the search results is displayed, there is the search results screen kind of has a annotate, like the bookmarks handler kind of thing. So I'm ready to accept any bookmark views, like you tell me. So you either tell it that it is lit up or it's off, and it turns it on based on this other data source, and that is coming from the main app. The main app is the tells you, and the search results is the observer there.
One very good one. Did you have any problems debugging protocol buffers? Like, so I know there's a lot of talking around debugging HTTP, JSON payloads. What are you using to debug that? Or do you not have to debug it because it's kind of want a better term, a strongly typed payload?
We do need to debug it. It's probably useful to arrive at how we got to protobuf. We started, it's a large risk to go to something like protobuf. So what we did was we did a spike to see how it works, what's the speed. Obviously, we did not figure out that the advantage of the shared models and everything in the spike, because there's only so much you can do in a spike. What we ended up doing was, at some point, it looks good, but we are not sure. So at the very start of this project, let's keep going with this for 1 month. And we meet up after a month and go, okay, this is terrible, let's just roll it back. At that point, it's not that hard to roll it back. There's only a few models in that way. And in that month, we looked at it and we figured that it is really good. These conversations are extremely good, what we're having. Next, debugging. Charles has first-class support for protocol buffers, so you can completely see all of those things.
Just another quick one. Your first slide said that the components register with the search results screen, and then they kind of know about it. But isn't the companion API really meant to dictate what gets composed in there? Like, why did you need that registration step? Why doesn't the search results just go, hey, companion app said, throw this in there?
We want to separate the concept of, if let's say we get to a point where we have 500 things going into a search result screen. It's not, it is very possible. And that's right. So 500 things. We want to separate it and go, these kind of items are only registered to the inbox screen, and that never goes into the search result screen. And it is possible to come back from the companion API, but it never goes on the screen.
Some of this dynamic behaviour has introduced a lot of testing challenges.
Yeah, it does. We haven't proven. We've tried to prove it out by, there is 52 possibilities of the permutations. We have tried that out by putting it in the example app of the module. So a residential module, like I said, that has that 52 permutations possible. And if you launch that example app, it just displays all of those things. That's kind of it at the moment. We're not seeing the pain of it. I'm sure we will have to figure this out. Like how do you test this? Even though you can display 52 different things, there are actually only about 4 things that will ever come back from the companion API. This is just a future-proofing mechanism where, in case 6 months from now somebody asks for, hey, I would like to display it this way, you don't have to make an update for a small thing. It's just there.
Cool, is there any more questions?